Hello, everyone, and welcome to season 2 of BAEP Talks with. This is where we have a short discussion with a person of interest, typically someone who has experience living with, managing, treating, and or supporting others with a chronic menstrual health condition or disorder. My name is Julia Mandeville. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, I am the co-founder of the Barbados Association of Endometriosis and PCOS and your host. And today I am joined by Janelle Chase Mears, a mental health consultant. Hi and welcome, Janelle.
Hi, thank you so much.
So happy to have you here. And before I move on, Happy New Year to you. Happy 2021 to you. And happy and safe 2021 to all of our listeners and viewers. So a little about Janelle before we dive in. So again, we're really happy to have Janelle here, and she is a master facilitator and is currently a PhD student and, like I said before, a mental health consultant. She uses sociometry and experiential activities to engage her audience to create movement and change within their particular social spaces. That sounds really interesting. Mm-hmm. She is committed to bringing awareness to the topic of mental health and optimal human performance, and has worked as a leading therapist and facilitator for the past 12 years. Janelle is also a part-time lecturer at the Barbados Community College and the University of the West Indies. She also leads the team at Therapeutic Alliance Training, which provides workshops, seminars on personal development, team building, and all things mental health. She's the chief heart operator of Grief Recovery Works and specializes in corporate grief training. Again, Janelle, thank you for taking the time out of your extremely busy schedule to sit and have this chat with us.
Thank you so much, Julia, for inviting me in this chat.
Yeah, so I think most people would agree, and this is the reason why we specifically wanted you to come and have this chat with us, that 2020 was a pretty, I'm going to use the word remarkable, and unique year for a variety of reasons. And we at the BAEP wanted to have this sit down with you to learn more about, we know we feel things. We're feeling so many things throughout the year. How are we going to navigate these emotions? How can we take those lessons learned and maybe be more intentional about what we do moving forward for ourselves? What is this whole concept about saving space for others and ourselves, and how do we use that as we process emotions? So with all of that being kind of the framework, how does it sound to you to kind of have that discussion with us today?
I think it's a very important discussion because often at the beginning of the year, we look to reflect and then set resolutions. So I tell people for 2021, stop setting resolutions, use intentions. Let's be intentional, because sometimes resolutions, you set something that isn't anything you're trying to resolve, because it may be a very new behavior that you're trying to learn. So when you think about 2021, I always tell people it was a collective suffering or a collective healing for people. One of the two. You choose which section you want to jump in, right? But pretty much life always happens to people. Life has always been uncertain to people. It's just that everybody now collectively has a element of uncertainty. So when we begin to navigate what 2021 means for a lot of people, is really putting into perspective the silence or the quietness that they had to endure because there was lockdown and curfew all across the world. Also, a lot of people would have lost a lot of family members to COVID. Everybody has been impacted, and if they didn't lose them by death, they might have lost them in relation that actually happened to them, and they had to have the whole quarantine experience. And then also some people's careers might have stalled, relationships might have ended, people's well-being in terms of their mental health might actually have been a little bit more deplorable. And also people's relationships might have suffered from a different perspective, because a lot of people are very sociable. And when you take away the ability to move as freely as we've had as a society, you kind of force people now to actually be one with themselves. And a lot of people are not open to that experience, because we're not taught that that's an experience that you need to get in tune with who you are. And that's pretty much how people start to get well, when they strip away all the layers of what their career is, what their illnesses are, and really get into who they are and what their purpose is for being alive. So I think 2021 is an opportunity for people to really begin reflecting on how their lives really were working prior to COVID, because there's no returning to that normalcy. We were actually too busy. When you see the amount of illnesses that are on the rise, we are too busy, because most illnesses, if you look at the underlying concept of them, are all things that socially created, because we're too busy, or we're eating something that we're not supposed to eat, or we're undereducated about our bodies. And so therefore things spiral, and then we get all these diagnoses. So 2021 actually allows us now to slow down.
Yeah.
And slow down purposefully now.
You were preaching to the choir there. I feel very understood and heard from the jump. And I'm sure a lot of other persons have as well. And like you said, I am trying to make 2021 more purposeful after doing a lot of introspection. And so I think using this time as a time for reflection, but also setting intentions is something that could be quite beneficial for a lot of individuals. So I just have a question then. Do you think, based on your expertise, then were a lot of us, I should say, because everyone would have experienced it differently, but were a lot of us collectively grieving?
Definitely. And that's everybody, because everybody grieves. You know, grief is a normal reaction to any loss of any kind. What we tend to do is put grief on this pedestal as if it only happens in bad times. But something as simple as a child losing a tooth, that's grief, especially if you loved your big teeth. And then you got some cousin that always teasing you about, oh, you got a front teeth, that kind of stuff. We experience grief every single day, right? However, because it's such a taboo subject, and we like to say things like, you know, all grief is unique. I'd say your intensity might be unique, but there are a lot of similarities in the way in which we grieve, right? But that we don't speak about. So the fact that, like you said, you couldn't go out, there were a lot of people who felt the exact same way, where it's like, oh, yo, I want life, I want to go to the beach, I want to friend up, you know, that kind of stuff. And did it mean that you guys were not open to the fact that you had to collectively pause? No, that's not what it meant. But it meant that it was something that you lost that was a natural occurrence in your day-to-day experience. So yeah, I would definitely say 2020 has been the year of grief, in so many different ways. But because we don't have those larger conversations about grief, we sweep it underneath the rug. Like, you know, like some people say, well, y'all just need to be grateful that you're alive. But that's one way of looking at it. But, you know, you also have to be mindful that in life, there are losses that are tough and are hard to deal with. And sometimes you don't have the tools for it. You only get the tools as you experience it.
Right. So as we're on the topic of grief, I guess maybe you will want to, I don't know, take a step back and maybe define, you said grief is a loss of anything. So we've defined grief. And you spoke about potential tools. What are some practical things that persons can take home from this conversation about, you know, potentially dealing with, I mean, maybe ongoing grief, because 2021, it might seem like pretty much the same to a lot of people because of how it started. So maybe having knowledge of any tools that they could utilize to help them process their grief, if that's something you could share.
I think one of the things is to acknowledge what in fact you have lost, right? Often so let's take your example, you lost companionship. And are there ways in which you can actually then beef up the companionship now that you are a little bit less social in terms of personal space, but in in cyberspace, in the web space. And so it's first, you have to acknowledge what the loss is. And then second, you have to be able to complete that loss, because our old way of living no longer exists. That's just a reality. And a lot of us keep saying and using this word, I can't wait till things get back to normal. This is our crisis. This is our generation's crisis. There's World War I, World War II, depression, civil rights. All of those things have been people's experiences. And a lot of people don't get this, but we're actually in a very comfortable crisis because you're safe at home. Nobody's throwing bombs at you. Like, it's the external war is really our choices of whether or not we go and continue to spread it, or we stay home and figure out a way to actually keep ourselves safe. So I would say those would be the two things. You know, you have to be able to complete your loss and realize that, you know, this way of being is no longer coming back. And what am I going to do now? What does my life look like now for 2021? What do I intend to do for 2021? One of the biggest words for 2020 was pivot. And I think that's such a nice word to use in the space, but you can't pivot unless you got skills. So if you think about netball, and you could pivot all you want, but if you don't got the body to pass the ball with, you just go make a full circle.
It's very true.
So we have to add that when you pivot, take some new skills with you. You know, and whatever your new skills are, a direct relation into what your loss is, right? And you can't replace the loss, because often we want to replace or ask people to do something. We'll do it with like children. If they lose a cat or dog, you'll bring a cat or dog in their life to replace the loss. But really and truly, it actually makes them feel worse. A lot of people don't realize that, because you're saying that that loss was no longer significant. But when you acknowledge your loss and then you complete the actual loss, then you can actually begin to decide whether or not you want to have another relationship going on. And some children are like, no, I don't want another dog, I want my dog. And it may take them years for them to want a new animal, but it's all losses. You know, we grieve, but if we're never taught how to grieve them in the best way for our skill set at the time, we're always going to be spinning top in mud. So that's why you'll hear the comments like, oh gosh, 2021 start like this. But the reality of it is, the pandemic never stopped. It's your perception of how a year turns.
That is so, I mean, it's so poignant. Like, December 31st is supposed to be the point, right? But yeah, this situation has shown that is more of a theoretical point.
Of course. Yeah. There's no practicality of it. Yeah, the practicality is your changed mindset.
Yeah.
Like my new year starts April the 1st, because I do a lot of vision boards for people. That's one of the things that I do a lot in terms of companies and friends, and just I do a vision board party experience every year. And I don't like to set my visions while I am helping other people set theirs. So my year starts, my new vision board starts in April. My year starts in April. So it's a lot of what's your mindset. You know, if you've really wholeheartedly ascribed to, you know, the fact that January 1st means that everything that you did in the last year is over, but then you have to be true to that. You have to be true to that statement. But the pandemic hasn't changed. It don't matter if it's your birthday. It don't matter if it is Christmas. It don't, clearly in Barbados, it didn't matter if it was Christmas or not. It was like, y'all go hold these extra cases. So, you know, I think a lot of it is perspective and mindset with regards to what the new year means for you and what you're intended or intentional in creating as the year goes on.
Okay. I have a question. When you're talking about pivoting, so yes, we also use the term pivot. We in our social media we said we pivoted hard. You know, tried to modify our approach because we wanted to make sure that we still met our objectives. But then I'm thinking with pivoting comes some type of resilience. So then where would that come in? So we were talking about it from the organizational level, but then when we're talking about it from an internal individual level, how does one become resilient after all of the grief and all of the loss? Where does that come in?
Well, for me, resilience is in the living part. Most people have conversations about wanting to survive and wanting to thrive. You can't thrive unless you live. So if you say that this year has been a shitty year, 2020 was a shitty year, and you come back with 2021 with the same attitude, you haven't created resilience. Because life happens. And that's the part people miss all the time. Life happens, and can you live life on life's terms and be able to change the course as it relates to things that you have control over rather than things that you don't have control over? And so if you're taking the same narrative that you had in 2020 to 2021, you haven't built resilience at all. It's okay, so this is the situation. And it's very interesting because, a lot of people are up in arms with the amount of cases that we have. And I'm like, we didn't really know if our system worked. And that I will say is the measure of us creating resilience as a response to the pandemic in Barbados. Because before, when you were getting 2 and 3 cases before, you didn't know the outcomes. You didn't know how hard the staff had to work because they were never put under
the pressure
that they're now being put under. So resilience also comes with language change. So if you're not talking a different language, all you're doing is repeating your cycle, just in a different day, a different time.
Yeah. So with that language change, I guess involves like affirmations for yourself. Like that's another thing I'm seeing a lot of people do, like speaking positivity and speaking intention into their lives, and kind of not only keeping it to themselves, but like broadcasting it, so that I guess, I don't know if that is for it to, I don't know if there's some power in that where it materializes more.
Yes, there's definitely power when you speak affirmations that hold you accountable for your growth. Because we speak affirmations on the other side. People think affirmations are like airy-fairy. When you say, I'm enough. But y'all walking about saying every day, I ain't good enough though. You've affirmed the other side. So we all speak affirmations. It's just whether or not you want to heal and grow or stay in despair and shame. Choose one. There's nothing. So it's always funny when people say, oh, y'all doing this airy fairy. It's like, no, you speak it. I'm never good enough. I don't know if I can get it. This is bare boo. You're affirming your experience. So every time you say 2021 is going to be a much harder year, you're affirming your experience of 2021. Now, to talk about resilience would be, in 2020, it was really tough, but you know what I learned? I learned that I could actually be on my own. I learned that I can choose better ways of actually treating my body. I learned that I didn't necessarily have to be around a lot of people to exercise. I could actually be self-focused and actually do the exercise on my own. I learned that I could actually stick with a schedule because normally I don't stick with a schedule. That's resiliency talk. That's affirmation talk on the other side. Sometimes we're very selective in our ability to change the narratives because our ego says that this is how it should be.
Yep.
Yeah. Versus this is what I've got, and I'm going to learn to live life on life's terms. Because there are a lot of people who would have experienced similar things like that, couldn't see their family members, and that had nothing to do with COVID. It might have been through to another illness, but they learned how to cope with it, or they learned how to create different strategies to help them actually feel loved and welcome and warmed. And sometimes we forget that we can change the narrative mid-sentence. And it doesn't have to be everything that everybody's doing. And this also COVID, I always tell people, like, now for 2021, you're going to start seeing all the people in your life who actually have proper tools in their toolkit to function and to live effectively in this space. Because you still need to live in this space. This is the space that we have now. It's not changing for the next 2-3 years based on what we're seeing. And so I know a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, but I don't want my entire year to be gone. But the reality of it is, this is always, mindfulness is about no. You don't know if you have 2022. You will love to have 2022. That's what intentionality is about. But the mindfulness still has to be the presence of no.
No. Wow. how do we then support others that might not necessarily have the tools currently to, to start that journey, or if they're currently on that journey, to help them, throughout that journey? Because everyone isn't going to be the same space at the same time.
So new information always helps. So something like this helps people who might not have thought about it this way. I think also example, you being an example, or because that's why people watch celebrities. That's why people, because you look up to them and doing something that you would like. So having an example, or you being an example of actually doing the things that you need to do to make it through, becomes really important to help people see. But on the flip side, I always tell people, and I always tell friends, stop being unpaid therapists, because you spend so much time trying to bring along somebody who's not ready to be brought along. And you also have to learn to let that go. And a lot of people struggle with that, so they get caught up in other people's inability, because sometimes people are genuinely not ready. They've
Right.
not they may not be ready because their environment doesn't allow them to be ready. And something like COVID, they can't leave the house, or they're not going to move out or anything like that. So it's being mindful of that as well too, because sometimes you're pulling somebody to get better actually does them more harm than good.
That I can understand. They can only be ready when they're ready, right?
Yeah.
So do we still hold space for them even though they're not ready? And then what does holding space mean? I keep hearing about holding space in so many different settings. Yeah.
So I would tell you my holding space definition is the ability to be present for somebody through their emotional state and well-being. That means if somebody's pissed off, you gotta learn how to just hold space for their being pissed off. Most of us can't hold space for people in other states than sadness. And most people don't empathize with people when they're sad. They give them sympathy. And sympathy drives disconnection. Empathy fuels connection. So the whole concept of holding space is, can you actually allow people to be where they are without you having an agenda of making them feel better? Because that's what a lot of people try to do, make people feel better when they're not where they're not giving you their best, like according to you. And for me, it's really being there and being present and being able to walk through people as they navigate their new choices. And also as they navigate some of their old hurts, because it's a lot to watch people experience their old hurts in the same way that they experienced them the first time. So yeah, that would be my working definition of it. And a lot of people are not skilled to hold space. They say it, and I teach therapists and I teach social workers, and we have this big conversation about empathy. And I would use this example of it. If somebody came in and they're really pissed off at somebody, what would you do? And when they're first starting, I was like, Mom, I've got to tell you to calm down. I'm like, no, that's not empathy. You would have to listen to the person and actually hear it. And if they say, well, I didn't really want to let you down, and you actually for a moment understand why he would want to let him down, you could actually say, I would let you down too. But a lot of people can't go there.
Right.
Because you are scared of somebody's emotion, right? And I'm not agreeing with you of their action, but I can understand why you would be so pissed off, because as a human being, we all experience all levels of emotions. And I don't believe emotions are good or bad.
Right.
They're just useful or not useful. They're effective or ineffective to the situation at the time. All emotions make sense at some point. If not, our bodies would not store them. Our bodies would not actually share them in the way that it shares. So that, to me, that would be my answer in terms of holding space and understanding what empathy truly is. A lot of people don't, but they want, and the people who they tell them that they're holding space for them, tell them, point, you're not, and they get offended. But when you feel heard and seen, people know you tell somebody you feel heard and seen. When you don't feel heard and seen, you also let them know. Brené Brown does a beautiful, Brené Brown is a PhD researcher, that social worker who studies shame and empathy for years. And so
I love
I love her work.
Mm-hmm.
And I think she's very groundbreaking in helping people understand empathy. So she has a short snippet that talks about empathy. And there are 4 points when she breaks down empathy. First one is that empathy is perspective taking.
Mm-hmm.
You take the perspective of somebody else, not your perspective. The next one she talks about is the whole concept of getting out of judgment. Because often when we're trying to be kind with people, we're very judgmental with them. And I always tell people, you're judgmental, but you have to learn to get out of it. There's nobody that's not biased in the world, because you come with morals and values and beliefs from your environment. And judgment, the greater level of judgment is discernment. That's how you get discernment. You can't have discernment without judgment. So we like to say that, well, I'm not judgmental. Yes, you are. But you have to know what you're judgmental about. Mm-hmm. The third one is recognizing emotions. A lot of people cannot be empathic because they don't even know emotions. If you were to ask the typical Bajan or some of the ladies that you have, they will give you a certain set of emotions, but the other ones they won't have. Or they will say, I'm fine, I'm good, I'm cool. I keep telling people that's not emotions. Mm-hmm. That's a rhetoric that you've been taught, that when you don't want to tell people your business, you tell them. You don't share openly, right? Yeah. I use this example all the time. When you go to the gas station and somebody asks you, hey ma'am, how you doing? The first thing you say, you okay. But that time you and your boyfriend quarreling and you pissed off. And somebody's like, but you would tell she you pissed off? Yeah. He's like, right now I'm pissed off, girl. But anyway, I hear by grace of God. Because you've honored. So a lot of us lie about our emotion just so we don't have a conversation with other people. So once you're doing that, you don't know how to be empathic. Because you always dishonest with self. So if you're dishonest with self, you can't be honest with anybody. You pretend. And that's why when people say, but she is fake, people get upset. But no, real recognize real. Mm-hmm. If you're not empathic, they're going to tell you. Clients do that. If they don't feel it, if a therapist is being empathic, they let the therapist know. Right? And the last one is feeling with people. And I love that. I love the actual thing that she does, the video that she does, because there's this point where the person is really low and they actually crawl into a hole. And the other person who's supposed to be empathic will be like, hey, what's up? And the person's like, I'm really not that good. Hey, you want sandwich? And feeling with people is literally crawling down in the hole and having a seat.
Yeah.
Not trying to pacify anybody's experience. And often, because we're not comfortable with uncomfortable feelings, we try to make people feel better. And sometimes people don't need to feel better at the moment. They just need to feel. So all of those are things that empathy, and when you can be a master of all 4 of those, you've got empathy. But if you still just trying, you could tell people, I'll try to be empathic with you. That may be a more useful. That's more honest, you know. And I always tell people, when you don't know what to say, tell people, girl, I really know what to say right now. Mm-hmm. Like, be okay with saying, I don't know what to say. However, I'm here with you. Right. You know, I have a girlfriend of mine who she actually lost her husband about 3 days ago. She got up, found him dead. No, that's my personal story where I lost my husband. And as I was telling my girlfriend that called me, I was like, this one hard. I know how to say it. I went through this, but I still didn't know what to say. So when I call her, it's like I just called, see a pretty face, and that was it. There was no like, I know what you went through. It was like, all right, I'm here. I'll walk through with you. But at this point, based on how it happened, I just called her to make sure that I could see her face, and that's it. And that was me being empathic to her. Not, girl, I went through this with you. I went through like 13 years ago, like. That's not the place and the time for me to do it. So empathy is also knowing when to say and how to say it, right? And a lot of us, if you don't practice this in your day-to-day life, you're not going to be able to do it with other people.
So I came into this conversation thinking it would go one way. And I mean, I can say before we started recording, you said, like, you know, you work a specific way, and I'm so happy that you are taking, you know, control and leading this conversation, because it's definitely going much better than how it would be going if, you know, we were going according to my script, because I'm not sure, you know, obviously when it's out there how others are going to respond, but I'm feeling a lot of feelings. that I
Okay.
think I need
Good. Well, feel them, because that's what they're designed to do.
try to your point, be more empathetic and be honest, when I'm, engaging with others or even myself.
Mhm.
With all of that being said, how then do we go forth with setting intentions for 2021? I think that's where I want to kind of, I guess, close off. I think we need to bring it back because I think there's a lot more to be said. But
Yeah.
I guess to close this off, how do we go forth and set intentions for 2021, knowing all that we know, knowing that we are going through this collective grief. We are in different stages of deciding whether or not we're ready to be intentional and to talk about resiliency, thinking about our emotional quotient, thinking about empathy towards others and ourselves. Yeah, where can all of that filter down into with setting intentions to 2021?
So I think what I can leave you with is being intentional with thought, actions, and feelings. And I'll break that down a little bit. So your thoughts, you have to be intentional with who feeds them, right? So that's your media, the people around you, what you read, what you watch, right? Who filters them? So who do you have conversations with about your thoughts? Because those who follow me know that I talk about this. We have this thing in our head called the itty bitty shitty committee. And we could be out there like just entertaining the wrong thing, right? So it's definitely filtering them and being able to have a sounding board. Then who entertains your thoughts? Because sometimes when you are not in a position of going for greatness, you may speak to somebody who entertains your stuckness.
You're stuck.
We have to be mindful of that, right? Because when you get to a point of being stuck and not having movement, who are the people that you will reach out to actually help you shift that narrative and update that perspective? I always tell people your cycle of your anxiety or your cycle of depression, just check and see where your environment is. Go check where you eat, where you sleep, who you was talking to, who you was watching, and boom, you got a pattern. So unless you want to keep doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results, right? We gotta do something different.
Yeah. That's a definition of insanity, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We're still in that loop. And at the end of the day, it's not the therapist that changes somebody who's experiencing depression and anxiety. It's the person who makes a decision to get well, right? We just provide them with tools. So the thoughts, and then I would say your action. For me, your actions are either rooted in behaviors that would add value to what your growth and your healing for 2021 will be, or take away value. Either side of the coin is hard. Choose one.
Yeah.
To do the work or not do the work. And then your feelings. What's your intention and your state, your emotional state? Often we allow things and experiences to throw off our intention. And the business of intention is continuation and commitment. So you could say all you want to have a great 2021. It is what you're doing that reinforces that you're having a great 2021. So to allow yourself, when you are distracted or when obstacles come in your way, to stay in that intention is definitely part of the feeling part, right? Like if you get up in the morning and you get up and you catch a flat, you call the man and the man come and fix the flat, you can know about your business. So there's some people like, oh God, I get a flat, I can't get away now, and I'll get paid and that kind of stuff. Dude, if you got cars get flats. Then I need to nobody. It just happened to you today.
Right.
Right. So if your intention was to have a good day, get the man to come fix the flat and go along and have a good day. Right. But again, it's speeding the thoughts, speeding the behaviors, because we will call the girlfriend, girl, you can imagine they come out the car, they got flat. It's bare nonsense. No, now I gotta wait for the man. It's like we have to be very intentional in those three things: our thoughts, our actions, and our feelings, and write it down. That's why reflection of your day, reflection of your year, reflection of your month becomes so important. I always tell people, the people who are overwhelmed at the things that they didn't accomplish at the end of the year in 2020 were the ones who every single month. You wait too long to reflect. Mm-hmm. So reflect at the end of your week. Learn to reflect at the end of your day. Reflect at the end of week. Reflect at the end of month. So by the time 2021 comes around, you would have had so many reflections and opportunities for growth that it just became a snowball effect. That okay, what did I do well? What didn't I do well? And how am I taking the skills that I learned in January into February? And I would tell people that, go back, even if you did for the last quarter, because I really truly can't remember much of 2021 in terms of timelines, because we weren't as stringent. You would have your crop over if you're in Barbados. Those things punctuate your experiences.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But we didn't really have those. No. So we have to go back. Look, girl, when was the first lockdown? I can't remember. Or something. When did we get opportunity to go to the supermarket? We don't really have those timelines, right? Mm-hmm. But if you do have some, because October, November became a little bit more, open. Regular. Yeah, it became a little bit more regularized in the things that we do on an everyday basis. Go back and reflect and see what skills you have. Because the thing about a skill is you can continue it or you can sharpen it.
Right. Mm-hmm.
We don't lose it.
No, it's always
it's just dormant. Mm-hmm. And so when you're talking about intentional in your well-being, you have to start looking at the things that you've done, what you've done well, and the things you haven't done well, and how you shift that. And that would be, for me, is those three things. If you can be consistent with knowing your thoughts, actions, and feelings, and moving through the intention as an execution, 2021 will be different.
Moving through the intention as an execution.
Yeah.
Yes. I think I would like to end it there with that as your last message. Thank you so much, Janelle. I'm so thankful that you joined us to share your wisdom with us. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us on this BAEP Talks with. We will see you next time. Bye.
Bye.